The power of fiction is that it will take us to unexpected places on unexpected journeys. Because no matter who you are or what background you come from, by diving into the imagined stories of others, we can perhaps push past our own constructed lives. Take, for example, Fiona and Jane.
Fiona and Jane is about the lives of two Taiwanese American women. It follows them and their friendship over 20 years as they explore identity, sexuality, heartbreak, family secrets, and remain constant in each other's lives.
Ho immigrated from Taiwan to the US as a child. A new country, a new language, an experience that no doubt shaped the writer she would become and informed the characters she'd create. She had challenged herself to write not only about mental health issues, but about race, culture, and identity. And this is a book that could only have been written by a rapidly rising star with an American tapestry of a backstory. Fiona and Jane by Jean Chen Ho, on this episode of Book Club. "20 minutes outside Los Angeles in a quaint cafe, Jean Chen Ho comes to write.
I've been coming here for years and years, and this is a very special desk because people leave notes in here. And I think I have left notes in the drawer, and sometimes they're inspirational sayings or woes. And I think it's sort of nice for people to leave notes for one another in here. Yeah.
So you can read them?
Yes. Maybe you should leave one.
Dear diary, I hope I get tied up by this handsome silver fox, and may love.
Wait, you're not making that up?
No, may love set your heart on fire. XO.
Oh my God.
January 16th. No, you think I made that up?
Yes.
About Anderson Cooper, the silver fox?
Here, one of her favorite places, Jean Chen Ho found the words she was looking for over the last 5 years, writing her first novel. The accolades for Fiona and Jane are rolling in, with critics calling the book real, electric, and refreshingly life-sized. It's all Ho has ever wanted, but it's not without its challenges.
I think the difficult part is just feeling very vulnerable and exposed. You know, even though the book is not autobiographical, I think there's just an assumption that I've lived those things, or I've written, like there's a lot of cringy moments in the book, and you know, people are gonna think that that's me, maybe. I don't know. It's just a weird feeling.
Is that what it is, or is it also just the vulnerability of having something and putting it out there, and now people judge it and criticize it, and I mean, because I know personally, like from writing too, like when you put it out there, then people get to say what they think about it, and maybe they don't always like it, right?
I mean, I think that's fine if they don't like it. The weird thing is like when people don't like it and they'll tag me on Instagram after some person was like, I want my money back, this book was the worst. And she tagged me on Instagram, and I was like, why'd you have to tell me that? Just get a refund.
Right. Well, let's talk about the book because it is beautiful, and that person on Instagram is an idiot, in addition to being rude.
She'd become Fiona in the 2nd grade, shortly after she and her mother arrived in the States. A white boy in Miss King's class had declared that Ona wasn't a real name. She was new, and the boy spoke with authority, so she believed him. She needed a new name, a proper American name. In the back of the dictionary, her mother found a list of girls' names. They landed on Fiona, adding a syllable in front of the name she already had. If she said it fast, Fiona sounded like the Mandarin word for wind. When she pointed that out, her mother had laughed and added that wind was also a homonym for insane. My crazy, windy girl, her mother teased. Don't fly away from me. I won't leave you, Fiona had promised. Never.
It's almost like short stories, except they're all about the same people.
Yeah.
Jane, you write in first person. Fiona, when you're writing about her, you write in third person.
Yeah.
Are we meant to think that you are Jane, or that the book is kind of written from Jane's point of view in a way?
I don't know. Well, it's funny that you say that they really like short stories, because I think of the book as a linked story collection, but lots of people have been saying that it's a novel. So it's somewhere in between, or both.
Well, like Jennifer Egan's Visit from the Goon Squad,
Yes,
it's the same
yeah.
way, right? It's
Yes.
a bunch of short stories, but they're all in
Yeah.
the same world.
Yeah, I love that book. But as to your other question, is it meant to be read from Jane's point of view? Yeah, I think there's people who tend to enjoy reading first-person narratives, and then there's people who hate that because, you know, you're in the character's head the whole time. You're stuck with their voice. So in third person, you can sort of move around more. So I wanted to just sort of practice both with my first book.
When you say that you feel vulnerable because people will assume parts of this book are you writing about your own personal, sexual, familial experiences, whatever. Some of it has to be autobiographical because it's so personal and real.
Well, I did, like Fiona and Jane, I did grow up in Southern California. So, you know, there's parts of this world that are very familiar to me. So even though the stories are fictional, I share emotional DNA with both of these characters. And I also have long-standing friendships with women who I've known since I was a teenager. So not as far back as the second grade, but those are really important friendships to me. And the ways that our friendships have changed in the last 20 years is really a big part of who I am as a person. We are at my high school, Whitney High School in Cerritos, California. Shout out to 90703. I still have a group of best friends who I met when I came to Whitney, and we're still great friends today. One of our group recently, in the pandemic, took her own life. So that has been a huge loss to our friend group. I'm still grieving her death, but because of that group of friends, I have many great memories here at Whitney. And I'm sorry to say we also ditched school a lot.
Mental health is a big issue in the book also. It's a big subtext. One of the main characters loses her father to suicide. There are other people who struggle with their emotional health. That probably feels very intensely personal. This is something you've talked about publicly, losing a friend to suicide, and also your own struggles.
Yeah, I started going to therapy just for my own mental health probably about 3-4 years ago, because I'm also a grad student, so I'm in the middle of getting my doctorate. It's a very intense experience, and I just felt like I was gonna crumble under the pressure of that. Honestly, I used to have this totally biased idea that therapy was for white people. I know that sounds maybe a little bit naive or strange, but you know, mental health was not something that I talked about with my parents growing up, for example. And so in this book, I wanted to have that as a thread sort of underground. Looping back to your question earlier about how it's been to publish a book, it's been so thrilling, but to have lost one of my best friends as all that is happening has been really heartbreaking. So I want everyone who reads the book or who might be watching now to seek help and not feel ashamed that they need help.
Do you feel as though culturally it's taboo in certain Asian American communities, or maybe just it used to be?
You know, I can't speak for the whole culture, obviously, but
Right.
I can talk about in my family experience. As a teenager, I really struggled with my mental health, and I really felt like I couldn't talk to somebody about that. And I don't blame my parents or, you know, the other adults in my life. I just didn't have the language for that. And maybe this is because this was in the 90s and we didn't have the internet back then like we do now. So I didn't know where to turn. So in my own family experience, that's not something that was present when I was a kid. But I think now things are opening up, right?
As a person and as a writer, Jane Chen-Ho does not steer away from traditionally taboo topics.
There's a quote from Toni Morrison, who's one of my favorite writers, and she said, in this country, if you're American, it means you're white. Everybody else has to hyphenate, right? And so I think that culturally, maybe that's changing. in 2022 because the country is getting more and more diverse, more brown. And I think that there's a lot more conversation these days about the invisibility of whiteness and how that needs to change, right? But I think even in the literature that we read and in the canon, or what we know as the canon, which is very Western, if you don't hyphenate or mark your character as other in some way, for the most part, the reader's going to assume that that person is white. And so one of the challenges that I had to sort of negotiate as a writer, creating a universe with Taiwanese American characters and other characters who are of color, is there a way to write a story that is about identity and race and all of the stuff that comes with that, but also not to do it in such an obvious way. This most recent Christmas in LA, she'd invited Jane over one night. She'd introduced her to Willie as my best friend, though in truth, they'd hardly kept in touch. A distance between them Fiona felt acutely, marked by unspoken things added up. She knew the contours of Jane's life, not its interior. If Fiona moved back to LA, what would their friendship be like? No longer held aloft by the nostalgia for their high school years, the romance of their present distance.
Let me just also say, like, nobody watching us right now should think that this is something that should only be found in the Asian American section of the fiction part, or should only be found in a LGBT because one of the characters is bisexual. It's just a great book. It's just a great novel. And yes, the characters are Taiwanese American, but I don't think there should be any, like, if there's like a straight white man out there who's thinking, well, this doesn't sound like something for me.
Yeah.
I disagree. Do you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
it's just great fiction. It doesn't matter.
Thank you. Can I put that as a blurb in the paperback?
I just said it, so you can have it. There isn't a ton of representation of Taiwanese Americans in fiction. There's some, but it's not as prominent as it could be.
Sure.
And when I was reading it, and I was reading about, because there are scenes that take place in Taiwan, there are scenes that take place in California, scenes in New York, and I was hearing about this experience, reading about this experience. I was thinking, there's actually nothing in here that I identify with more or less than when I read The Great Gatsby. I mean, I don't live in Long Island in the 1920s, and like I don't know any flappers, and I don't like know people of obscene wealth that way. You know what I mean? Like,
you're not a millionaire who throws parties to meet your like former sweetheart.
yeah, no, but I'm just saying, like, why is The Great Gatsby canon, and Fiona and Jane would be put in the Asian American? That's the question. That's the point I make.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
There's a lot of sex in the book.
Yeah.
There's a lot of sex in the book. Not unusual for two single young women.
Yeah, writing about their romantic and sexual adventures was really fun. And so, I don't know, I wanted also to write about Asian American women, you know, having romantic failures, but also having a lot of joy. And, you know, I think sex is a source of pleasure, right? So I wanted to make sure I got that in there. After he and Fiona were married for a year or so, I guess I started to accept him. When he wasn't prepping his sides and I wasn't showing vacancies or dealing with repairs, we would meet up for happy hour, killing time before Fiona clocked out. Of the three of us, she was the only one who held a job with steady hours, a paralegal at a litigation firm with the name of its partners on a high-rise downtown. Those wine-soaked afternoons eventually led into Fiona and Aaron's troubles, with me caught in the middle.
These are multifaceted characters. Not only are they sex positive, but Ho also says her work helps provide wider representation and visibility at a time when hate crimes against Asian Americans are on the rise.
We are now in a world where hate crimes against Asian Americans are getting worse, it seems. That's not part of this book. Has it been part of your life? Is that something that you've wanted to write about?
Yeah, well, I did write something. I wrote a short essay that was published in GQ after the Atlanta massacres at the spas. I think the anti-Asian hate crimes have been especially difficult to process. So when those massacres happened, I felt so heartbroken. So I wrote a short essay about how Asian American women's lives, even if they are just somebody who you might not even notice because there's somebody who's there. These women were people who worked in a massage parlor. And I think they deserve the same respect and they deserve their full humanities just because they exist. And I think in this country, we don't give people that sort of respect. If they're working class, if they're a person of color, perhaps, right? So I think that the book doesn't explicitly have any incidents of violence, but there are moments when characters feel like they are not enough.
Ho is pursuing a PhD in creative writing at the University of Southern California. And now with a best-selling novel, her own self-discovery continues.
How long have you known that you wanted to write fiction for a living?
I've always been a lifelong reader. I've been such a book nerd since I was a kid. But I didn't start really letting myself explore that until about 10 years ago.
So you said that Fiona and Jane have your DNA in them and the DNA of your friendships. Mm-hmm. Do you see parts of yourself in one or the other or both? Or
I'm every single character, or there's parts of me in every single character. You know, I put my heart and soul into writing this book. It took a long time, and there's lots of pages that I've written that have been thrown away. So I'm in everyone and everything in this book.
So will we read more about Fiona and Jane in your next book? Or will you have new characters?
I will have new characters, I think. But in my imagination, they are still living on.
Right.
Even though we leave them at age 38, 39, their friendship continues.
And that's exactly how you'll feel. You'll have gained an insight into a real, meaningful relationship that seems to exist beyond the pages of the book. Fiona and Jane, a moving story about friendship and growth and loss, one that transcends labels.
No, that one, that's the best. That's the best. We look like we're old friends.
Yes, we're buddies. Okay, let's do that one.
Okay,
Very cute.